Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's SIIA TechChats. I'm your host, Jennifer Carl. Joining me this week is David Egts, Chief Technologist, North American Public Sector from Red Hat. David also sits on the Software and Services Division Board. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here, Jennifer.
Excellent. So at the SIIA annual conference, we had a unique experience where a breakout session kind of turned on its head and ended up being focused on you and open source. So let's go ahead and jump right in. It seems like so much of the innovation in the software industry is embodied as open source. What is open source?
Yeah, so for people that don't know, open source software, it's a type of software whose code is released under a license in which the copyright holder grants the users the rights to study the software. They could change the code, they could redistribute the software for to anyone and for any purpose. And this code is also developed often in an open manner as well.
So why would a software company want to make their source code available to everyone, including their competitors?
hmm Yeah, and it seems like a contrarian sort of thing, right? But what it really does is like in the case of Red Hat, it allows us to fight above our weight class, and the same with other open source companies that are out there as well. So this is really important for startups. So if we take a look at, say, as an example, the Linux kernel, according to the Linux Foundation in 2017. Red Hat contributed about 7% of the changes to the Linux kernel between versions 4.8 to 4.13. Okay. And so that means for every dollar of engineering Red Hat put into the Linux kernel, we got over $14 worth of code back. And you compare that to a proprietary company where for every dollar of code they put in, they only get a dollar's worth of code back because they're the only people that are writing the code. So what this really does is this allows smaller companies to take on and disrupt much larger companies than themselves.
Okay, so what about security? If everyone can see your code, doesn't that open you to attack compared to proprietary software companies?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like a lot of times whenever I see people that see open source code or they hear about open source, it's like, oh my gosh, everybody could see the code. But I see it as open source forces good software development and security hygiene. And so so since everybody can see the code, open source software companies have a vested interest in writing clean code and minimizing security vulnerabilities. So they can't hide behind binaries like proprietary companies. And they also have a vested interest to respond to vulnerabilities as it puts their software at greater risk than proprietary companies. So the result is that open source companies they're incentivized to be much more responsive to the communities and customers they support, leading to better products and better relationships with their customers.
Well, the question on everyone's mind right now is how do you make money selling free software?
Yeah, volume, of course, right? Um, no, but seriously, companies like Red Hat have traditionally built their business around a subscription model, and today the value isn't really in the software itself, but rather the people that do the support and they do the innovation. And so, like in the past, people would buy a very expensive software license that would have big software costs for the license and then a lower cost support tail. And what this did was it created an incentive for companies to come up with new versions and features as revenue generating events, whether or not the customers wanted them. And so this really put the software companies at odds with their customers. And with the subscription model, that is a fixed price and is consistent. This allows the software vendors to be aligned from an incentive standpoint with their customers. So instead of version churn as revenue generating events, a subscription really allows customers to stay on an older version or move to a newer version when they're ready. And this leads to a better relationship between the software vendor and their customers.
Let's close out with some words of advice for the software companies watching today. If they're not engaged with open source development, what are the best ways for them to get started?
Yeah, I would say the first thing to do is just start small, right? Where, participate in some communities that are already out there that are of interest to your organization. What technologies that are out there are really important to you? Where can you help out? And this participation will give you an idea of how open source works. And before you go and commit to, putting your own company out there and putting your own code out there, the next thing you want to do is look for opportunities for open sourcing parts of your own technology. And this would allow you to harness a much bigger community than you have in your own internal organization to accelerate your own engineering efforts. And the key here is to not just throw the code out there and hope somebody shows up and starts making contributions, but you need to invest in building and curating a community. What you really need to do is budget for that, so that community building and evangelization will get developers to be incentivized and encouraged to work on your projects. And that could even include your competition. And so, and lastly, what I really recommend too is partner with open source companies like Red Hat. So, Red Hat, we provide low cost and free developer subscriptions. We provide training. We have a technology or an offering called Open Innovation Labs. And all of these things are there to help software companies get to market faster by harnessing the power of open source.
That's great information, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us today. For more information on Red Hat, you can visit their website, and we will see you back next week for SIIA TechChats. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.